Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a very interesting session. This session talks about patient involvement in research and drug development. Most often, patients are considered passive participants. They are considered subjects. To think about patients as co-creators, especially in drug development, is not something that is easily accepted. And it needs involvements from multi-stakeholders, from various partnerships. One of those partnerships is, of course, the industry that invests into the research. The other is an institutional mechanism that will invest into training and teaching patients how to participate in those drug development procedures. One such initiative is EUPATI. EUPATI is an acronym for European Patients Academy on Therapeutic Innovation. It started as a project in 2012, and it created courses that could formally teach patients to become experts, then that could then involve themselves in the research process and contribute meaningfully into the drug development process. We are in a very difficult situation right now, as all of us know. And we had these lofty goals of the Universal Health Coverage 2030, which is now completely waylaid. We have the pandemic where things are evolving every day. We want new vaccines, new medicines, new ways to treat people who are now, falling prey to the COVID virus. And in all these things, it's extremely important that we have the patient at the center leading the process. To be able to discuss this whole thing today, we have two very good speakers, two stellar speakers who have had the opportunity to work with in the past as well. It's my pleasure to introduce Lasse Jacobsen. He is the Senior Lead Patient Research and Alliances at Leo Pharma, and he brings 10 years of experience from working in pharma, the last 4 years in patient engagement teams across 2 different pharma companies. He has helped establish functions that ensures that the patient voice is not only heard, but also implemented throughout the value chain from early research to products. He has been part of numerous initiatives and coalitions across academia, patient organizations, and industries, working together to help improve the lives of people living with chronic diseases. Welcome, Lasse. Our second speaker is Tamas Bareski. He currently works as the course coordinator, content developer, and trainer at EUPATI, the European Patients Academy for Therapeutic Innovation. Before that, he was a member of the European AIDS Treatment Group, or the EATG, the largest European network of individuals living with HIV. Also working as its communication officer between 2015 and 2018. He has been HIV positive since 2003 and served as a member of the board of the directors of EATG for almost 4 years. He has also served as a co-chair of the European Commission's Civil Society Forum on HIV/AIDS between 2013 and 2015. Tamas also works as a partner and consultant in the patient-led and focused strategy advisory Advocates. Welcome to both of you, and I hand over the floor to Lasse now to make your presentation.
Thank you so much, Ratna, for that fantastic introduction. So I'll just share my screen. Just allow me a few seconds here. So there we go. And I'm just checking with you, Ratna, if you can in fact see my slides now.
Yes, I can. They are perfect.
Okay, that's great. So as Ratna said, I'm Lasse Jacobsen. I sit as the Senior Lead of Patient Research and Alliances at Leo Pharma. And I'm here today to talk about how we at Leo collaborate with patients, and of course the overall topic of ensuring patient education and why that makes so much sense in all its meaning. So my presentation today, in short, will be very much around how we work and collaborate with patients. So nothing about you without you. I'll come into the details of that in a second. Second point is going to be around our what we call EPIC initiative. So that is basically our patient panels and how we involve patients and how we work with patients across different diseases. The third point here is around co-creations in medicines R&D, super relevant when it comes to EUPATI and the training program there. And last, a couple of conclusions to lead on to Tamas to take up the next part of the presentation. So first on, nothing about you without you. This is our mantra at Leo Pharma. This is how we work and co-create with patients. And what it means is that we bring in the patient voice in everything we do throughout the value chain. And that means from early idea generation and research, all the way throughout our clinical trials to our finished solution or product in the end. And this slide here is actually from the EUPATI website, where we had the pleasure of featuring an article last year that really talks about this concept, and it's exemplified within our focus of rare diseases and a specific disease we're looking into there called Gorlin disease, which was also featured yesterday by my boss Camilla from Leo Pharma and also Julie from the Gorlin Syndrome Alliance group. So at Leo, we have structured the way we work with patients across different tier levels. Now, what that means is, first and foremost, patients are disease experts, and in this case, when we work with patients, we work with our EPIC panels, and EPIC is an abbreviation for External Partners and Innovation Consultants. And if you look to the far left here, we actually operate, as I mentioned, in 3 different tier levels. If we take tier 3 to begin with, this is people who represent themselves and their own knowledge, their own story, and their disease journey. They talk to their families, they talk to their GPs, perhaps a specialist, and they're not, as such, the members of any formalized community structure. Then we have the tier 2 groups, who we also work with. That is people who are members of formalized community structures, but still represent their own knowledge around their disease. And then we have a 3rd tier level group, which is basically people who are leading the formalized community structures. It could be global patient leaders, it could be regional leaders, and it could be national leaders. And what's special here is, of course, they speak on behalf of many, so they represent the we knowledge, as we call it here, to the far right. And of course, there's not a hierarchy or preference in any way. It depends on where you are and what we're doing. As you know, if you look into some of the clinical outlines and the clinical trials, it is super relevant to ensure that we get a tier 3 patient to collaborate with, because we want to know, as for example, a newly diagnosed patient, we want to know, so what does our material look like from your perspective? Because it's important that we do our material in a way that is understandable for the majority of people. Whereas if we want to lead an advocacy, you could say focused work, or if we want to do something with a longer, stronger reach, we reach out to our tier 1 panel members. Now, how does that relate to EUPATI? It relates to EUPATI in a way that EUPATI focuses on patient expert training courses as one of its core elements here. This is an older slide, and Tomas will correct me if I'm referring to something that's a bit old information, but this was our module training of our patients in the EUPATI program. And as you can see to the far left, all the way throughout, it basically represents a value chain from early research, from some of the basic principles to our clinical development, study design ethics, to medicines regulations, and back to principles of working with HTAs and post-marketing. And as you can see from the circle in the middle here, what I focus on right now is the study designs, the clinical protocols, the clinical development part. And I try to relate that directly in this slide over to Leo Pharma and some examples of how we have worked with patients and how we are working with patients, aka our EPIC panels, in early idea generation. So if you look to the far left here, the frontline innovation in business development, a couple of examples could be we work with our EPIC groups identifying and assessing new opportunities, for example, within a specific molecule or a new partnership. Could also be that patient groups, the EPICs, help us validate a business case in terms of providing the unmet medical need or the disease burden from a patient perspective, which we then can include in our assessment of whether or not we are engaging in a certain molecule or a business case. If we move forward here to the phase 1, 2, and 3, I have mentioned a couple of examples here. I won't go into the details of all of them, but what's important here is we actually co-create the design of the patient value proposition. So how is it valuable for the patient if we come up with a certain solution? We also look at our target trial outline to say, well, reviewed from a patient, does it make sense potentially participating in a specific trial from a patient perspective in terms of an everyday life with a family, with a job. So in that way, it's a win-win on both sides, you could say. Also, when it comes to selecting the hospitals and clinics we work with, are they focused enough on the patient experience coming in, for example, as participants in a trial? We want to work with the right sites, of course. Moving on in the value chain, looking at the market approval. So numerous of examples, a couple of them enhanced here. So for example, on patient information leaflets, another thing that we co-create and have reviewed by our EPIC groups, meaning our patient experts. A couple of conclusions just to lead on the discussion here. So first of all, we involve patients as early as possible in the process of our medicines R&D at LEO. That gives us a chance to actually implement some of the learnings we get from patients as early as possible, obviously. Also, a second conclusion, it requires different profiles for different activities. So it doesn't mean that you need to be a leader of a patient organization in order to provide value. Quite the opposite. Sometimes you provide even more value with your own information around your disease and your journey up until this point in time. Learnings from the disease expert can lead to improved clinical trial designs. This is almost intuitive and logic, because obviously if we design according to what's preferences from the patient perspective, it leads to quicker approvals and thereby also safer and more precise medicines in the end. It has the potential to improve on key parameters, as I mentioned before, such as recruitment, retention, and amendments. These are all things that, again, lead to having a more precise medicines in the end and faster to market, so to speak. More of the above is coming in much more detail from Tomas around the patient education program in a second. But I would say, in all means, apply EUPATI and concept everywhere you can, both as a patient, as a company, and as an academic partner here. That was actually my last slide. The only thing I have left here is you can always visit leopharma.com and you can contact me, as it says in the bottom of the slide here, at fhudk@leopharma.com. I'm also in the chat box. We have a booth that you're welcome to visit, and you can always contact me there. And that was my last slide, Ratna.
Thank you, Lasse. That was an extremely interesting presentation, and I like that acronym EPIC, External Partners and Innovation Consultants. That's yes. Beautiful. And I would like to know more about the definition, though we did see the process of moving from me and my experience to our experience and how we can then collectively use that for, research and drug development. So moving over to Thomas, Thomas, the floor is yours, and we look forward to hearing from you on how you managed to design the course that has led to maybe around 200 fellows now and 60 more, undergoing the course.
That's correct. And what I will speak about today, and I'm so happy and feel distinguished to be here with you. I looked quickly at the participant list, and it's so good to see familiar names, even someone from my original home country, Hungary, which is rare that people turn up from Hungary at such international events. So I'm really happy to be here. And what I will talk about very quickly is, on the one hand, a bit of a theoretical frame for why we do what we do in the European Patients Academy, and also then I will speak a little bit about what we do in the Patients Academy. So there's been so many changes in the whole landscape of healthcare, which of course also impacts the patient communities. First of all, what we find extremely important is that patients talk to each other a lot more. There's a tremendous flow of information. Also, this traditional hierarchical structure within healthcare is slowly crumbling, maybe not everywhere, and maybe not everywhere with the same pace. But still it is happening because patients know more about each other's conditions and their own bodies and conditions. There's a huge amount of information available out there in the internet. There's a constant conversation going on. There's a certain buzz in social media, but also outside of social media. So there's a whole new environment in which patients also can and have to establish themselves, which also creates a very good background and a very good foundation for educational work. Now, the concept of the expert patient, which Lasse also mentioned, is not exactly new. It was first described in the HIV/AIDS tradition towards the end of the 80s, early 90s. Patients or expert patients are patients who know a lot more about their illnesses, but also about the socioeconomic environment and the system that their illness or themselves, their bodies are embedded in, so that they understand the environment and they understand the illness. They are not trained doctors, but they know at least as much about their own illnesses and about the landscape as doctors might know. And expert patients are also conscious multipliers of knowledge, of coping strategies, showing the way how you can live maybe a better or a more meaningful life despite being ill. And they are also multipliers of empowerment, so that they can just show to other people that there's life after a diagnosis. You have maybe different, but you still have perspectives, you have an outlook, even if you live with an illness, with a chronic or an acute illness. And that actually also then gradually turns people into more conscious consumers, but also more empowered citizens. So we understand that education is also a coping strategy, and it does help people to overcome all the negative impacts of illness. Now, this also means that science and policy, scientific work and policy work go hand in hand. So if you can learn something, say if you're a doctor, I can learn that too. It's not magic. It's not something where an angel descended from heavens and you were appointed a doctor. You went to school and you learned it. So if you could learn it, I can learn it too. And I can also learn how to achieve that particular objective that I want to achieve. So that is also what we mean by empowerment and by this transformational power of education that we strongly believe in. Now, today we also understand, and especially in this complex policy field that healthcare is embedded in, it's no longer enough just to report about the lived experience of an illness. It's no longer enough to go out there and to complain about how difficult it is with an illness, to live with an illness, because it's no longer convincing. People know this, politicians know it, they do care, or maybe they don't care, but it's no longer interesting. However, if you can underpin this argument, if you can underpin your storytelling strategies with hard evidence, with data, with knowledge, then it's a much more powerful approach, and it's also a much more successful approach. So that's why we argue so strongly for evidence-based advocacy, which includes that patients can and should be able to collect, organize, and deploy evidence, hard science, which again relies a lot on learning. This is a new way of knowledge production, which emerges in patient communities. Patients have the anecdotal knowledge, they also have the lived experience, and they also have an institutional knowledge. And by applying the right methodology through patient expert input, they can also generate evidence, which can then either be described in scientific journals, or they can be described in gray literature. However, it becomes an organized and deployable set of evidence. So what is it that patients can then do in research and development? They can inform, they can tap into trial populations, they can reach out much easier to so-called hard to reach populations, because some of us are them. So we talk to these people, to these groups of people. They understand the situation sometimes much better than researchers or doctors do. But also patients and patient communities can spread sound and scientifically established facts, something that seems to be extremely important today. Also, they can support recruitment into clinical trials. They can also support the retention of patients in clinical trials. And ultimately, they can mediate with key opinion leaders, clinicians, and also with investigators. Because maybe companies or maybe other researchers meet researchers and doctors once or twice a year at a conference or in a symposium. but they are actually our doctors, right? So I get to see my HIV specialist every 3 months or every 6 months. It's much easier for me to establish contact and to talk about issues that matter, just because we meet a lot more often. So this is the background why EUPATI came about, and why we realized that, okay, this is all nice, but there's just not enough people who can do this type of work. So we need to provide training, we need to provide input into the patient communities in order to facilitate this work and in order to facilitate these processes. So EUPATI was launched in February 2012 as an initiative co-founded by the European Union. And then, as you already heard, it continued for in this format for 6 or 7 years, and then it has gradually transformed into an independent foundation, which was just registered a month ago. So now EUPATI is an independent non-profit foundation which carries out this continuous training activity for patient communities, but also for industry, for academia, and for regulators in various formats that are available from us. There are several target audiences that we try to reach. First of all, we have an expert training course which targets specifically patient experts so that they can learn about these 6 areas that you see here. And also we offer a freely accessible broad internet library, which is called the Toolbox, where you can access more than 3,000 pages of information in these languages that you can see listed here. The total will be 13 languages when the new website is finished, so that you can at any time, free of charge, access this fundamental information with further links and explanations in order to facilitate your learning. So the patient expert training course has already been mentioned by Lasse and also by Ratna very kindly. Right now, you're right, the 4th course is running. And then from 2021, these courses will be available online and in an on-demand format, which will allow you then to enroll from anywhere in the world. You no longer have to be in Europe to come and be part of this training, but you can take the training from anywhere and then obtain the certificate as a EUPATI Fellow, as an expert as an expert patient. Also, we have national platforms in more than 18 countries, including Japan, meanwhile. So we are rolling out this work globally. And why this is so important is because if you have this information, if you have this knowledge, then you can also establish more safety in healthcare and in clinical trials and in how you work together within healthcare, with patient communities, also with doctors. So once again, the Toolbox contains, as you see, more than 3,500 content items. These are articles, PowerPoint presentations. Everything is free of charge, infographics, fact sheets. Please always reference that you take materials from us, but otherwise you're very welcome to use these. And also we have a very rigorous quality assurance process by which we make sure that all stakeholders, patients, industry, regulators, and academia are equally involved in the production and deployment of contents to make sure that nothing is biased, that it's soundly scientifically based. That's why our boards are mostly consisting of researchers, of scientists, social scientists like myself, but also medical scientists, to make sure that what we convey is science rather than input into policy, and then how you deploy that knowledge that you obtain with the Patients Academy. That's absolutely up to you. So good luck with that, and you're very welcome to join us anytime.
Thank you, Thomas. That was indeed extremely helpful, especially coming from a low and mid-income country where such systems don't exist. And I was very fascinated by your reference to evidence-based advocacy. Most often patients, as you said, are people who are storytellers. So they want to relate the experience the way they have experienced it without much scientific evidence supporting it. So having such an institutional mechanism which offers a course for people to formally be trained to understand the drug development clinical trial processes so that they can actually contribute as an expert that's trained in the process and has language and materials that are easily understandable, makes them much more valuable to the system than just lay people relating their experiences as stories. I just saw that there is one question which Thomas has already answered, but I had a couple of questions, one to each of you, and if it's okay, may I go ahead and ask?
Of course, yes.
So, yeah, so Lassie, I'm very impressed with the vision that Leo has to bring patients into the center of how you decide, which drug to develop and how it is developed. And with an institutional mechanism like EUPATI definitely helps that process. But what happens in geographies where you do not have that kind of an institutional mechanism? How do you then ensure that patients are part of the process?
Yeah, actually what we do is, and it's a great question, Ratna, thank you for that. So you're absolutely right. There are some countries where this is not per se possible in the same way as in other countries. And what we try to do is actually reach out to our friends and partners like yourselves and EUPATI, umbrella organizations that can help us get in contact with relevant local organizations and then go on that path, you could say. So that is one way of doing this. So actually reaching parts of the world that is, you could say, not as easy as others. So really bringing in our patient partners in the different organizations, that's one way.
Thank you so much. And Thomas, I had a question for you. Creating these patient experts who are undergoing a formal one-year course is excellent. And we hope to have many more such patient experts. And it's very heartening to see that there's going to be an online program that's going to be available for people across the globe. But once a patient is an expert, if there is no mechanism for them to be able to contribute to their national health systems or research agencies working in their area, what would you give as an advice to these people? How can they go and get themselves involved in that process?
Well, we've had a lot of that also in HIV and AIDS, and also in viral hepatitis, tuberculosis, not to mention. Where communities are not necessarily that strong or empowered that they could, effectively do policy work. I think that the only way forward there is through cooperation with global international organizations like IAPO, cooperation with other umbrella organizations that will coordinate this type of policy work of patient communities. We're a school, so we cannot do this. We're an academy, and we don't have the resources or the right knowledge to do that. However, we have a lot of partners out there in patient advocacy who work either in disease-specific organizations or they work across disease areas, who can help you establish your own networks, your organizations. We must do this together because it's such a massive field. It's such a massive challenge that there really is no other solution than working together. There's a lot of artificial competition across disease areas and organizations, which is completely meaningless. We should not fall into this trap. If we want to achieve change, then we have to do this together. So let's hold hands, and because we are in this together, regardless of what illness we live with.
Thank you so much. I think that's very relevant that, we are all in this together. We should hold hands and strengthen each other instead of competing with each other. And my last question again to you, Thomas, is you did mention that there are a lot of languages in which this course is available, but once it goes global, maybe English is not the preferred language in all regions. So are there any plans for translating it into local languages that are more relevant to people like, say, in India or China or some other country where English may not be the main language?
So one of the main reasons for starting with the translations was exactly that. And then one of the first things that we did was to provide Russian translation, because we understand that it's often neglected, while like 250 million people in the world speak Russian. So it's so we do have right now, it is being uploaded as we speak, because we have a new website set up, but it was there in the on the previous website. There is, all content will be available in these 13 languages, including Russian, including Japanese, and then we will roll this out to other languages as well. But it's a very expensive and a very painstaking process, and so it takes time. But yes, I mean, I'm absolutely with you. And then our local organizations, the local networks, they provide training courses in their local languages as well.
Thank you very much, Thomas. So go on, Ratna.
Yeah, I was just going to thank both the panelists for the wonderful session that we have had. It gives us a lot of vision and hope as a patient organization to engage more in research. Thank you so much to both of you. It was absolutely wonderful listening to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, panelists. I just now advise the audience to go into the next session, go back into the auditorium and join in. Once you have got safe medication, we have developed it, how are we going to dispense it safely? That's the question. So we're going to hear from FIP, the Pharmaceutical Federation, and community pharmacists, how this was achieved during COVID. Very terrible time for pharmacists as well. We lost a lot of them. Thank you very much, and see you at the other side. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.